This is the moment Good Samaritans confronted a knife-wielding suspect who police say had just gone on a stabbing spree at a Walmart in Michigan Saturday.
I've got a duty to protect.
Derek Perry, a former Marine, seen here drawing his gun, commanding the suspect, 42-year-old Bradford Gilley, to drop the knife he allegedly used to stab 11 people just moments earlier.
I didn't think of anything other than trying to get him away from people and get him isolated and get him to put the knife down and just to kind of focus on me and instead of everyone that was yelling and screaming in the background.
Perry says his intent was not to hurt the suspect.
God took over and said, we're going to get you through this. You need to go.
The victims range in age from 29 to 84. At least one remains in serious condition. Gilley, now charged with assault and terrorism, has a long criminal record and a history of mental illness and involuntary hospitalizations. Deputies were actively searching for him the day before the attack after a court order was issued to take him into custody. Authorities have not said why that court order was issued. Rhiannon Alley, ABC News, New York.
So, yeah, this guy was no stranger to authorities, and we'll talk about that in just a moment when it comes to these kinds of cases. But, Sheriff, I'd like to get your take on what this civilian did, this Good Samaritan. I saw you watching intently his actions.
Well, absolutely. He did a great job. And, he didn't have to go do that. Like everyone else, they could have just got away from it. But more people would have been stabbed if somebody hadn't intervened, obviously. After he had already stabbed 11 people. He would have kept on until somebody did something or the police got there and did it. And so, he did a great job. There were other people behind him, and it's kind of interesting, too. If they would have been, got involved if he had tried to physically take him.
Interesting. And let's talk about the law here, protecting folks like this.
Lori, Tennessee has very strong self-defense laws. And when you look at defense of a third party or defense of another, you basically legally put yourself in the shoes of that individual, and you're allowed to use the degree of force to protect that third party that third party would have been lawfully entitled to use. So it has to be reasonable, and you have to be reasonable in the belief there's imminent danger, but you just can't use deadly force unless you think there's an imminent threat of deadly force. So you basically have to match the degree of force that's being propelled or used against you or the third person.
Even so, can't that be subjective?
Well, it is a reasonable person standard. In the courtroom, it's an objective standard because you can't be overly sensitive and you can't be overly
I thought I was going to die, so I had
to protect. No, it has to be a reasonable belief. And then it gets even harder when you're defending a third person because you have to know what their danger or imminent perception is of a threat. Although it sounds like in the Walmart situation when someone has stabbed 11 people, that's not a very hard legal hurdle to me. But I was, watching this with Sheriff Hutchison, it was amazing, and that individual was an ex-Marine, how he just very calmly took and authoritatively took control of that environment that more people could have gotten hurt.
Absolutely. And it's obvious that he had a lot of training. You could see in his motion, the way he was holding the weapon, and the commands he was giving. He'd been trained and was using that training in a proper way.
You talked about the people behind him, and what if they had physically come into contact with this guy? That could have gone south pretty quickly had this one individual not been there taking command of the situation.
Oh, absolutely. And obviously he was still holding the knife and all, but he was separated by the Marine from other people. But had he not, there's no telling how many people until law enforcement got there would have been stabbed.
And one thing we want to point out to those of you watching, when you think stand your ground, you think of somebody crossing your threshold at home. That's usually the case. But as we saw here, it doesn't have to be your home. It's where you are legally allowed to be, correct?
That's right. It's where you're legally allowed to be. In public, in your vehicle, in your home, all of those it apply to. I can stand my ground and protect myself.
I want to talk about another case, and this one in New York. Sadly, we've had several of these cases recently. This one on Park Avenue, a guy is seen walking down Park Avenue. We've got the picture right there, clearly holding a rifle. No one is around him. No one comes up to confront him. He is allowed to go into this building. He gets on the wrong elevator and he starts shooting when he gets to an office, killing 4 people. This building has security. As a law enforcement person, what do you think when you see this?
Well, the security was an off-duty NYPD officer, and I suppose he confronted him, but I don't think he must not have been ready for him to use the weapon against him. Giving a command as a police officer to people doesn't mean they're always going to adhere to that. And if they've got a plan to do something, you better be ready to act early on and not react. You don't have time to react if he's going to raise that rifle and start shooting.
Scary situation. And when you think about the people in that building who were just caught with very little time to react.
Lori, it was interesting when you see him walking across the shooter, the mezzanine, very purposeful with that automatic assault rifle. You wonder why. I mean, of course, New York is New York, but there wasn't more alarm and more people on their phones saying there's a guy with an assault rifle walking in a building. But for example, Tennessee is an open carry state. If you are over 21, you can open carry a handgun. Our Attorney General Schimetti has said that he does not want anyone arrested between the ages of 18 and 20 for violating open carry.
And let's remind people why that is.
Why that is, because I think there's a strong fundamental right in the Second Amendment. And, an adult is an adult, so I think it's an arbitrary, the 21 is something, a line that we drew to combat underage drinking or excess drinking, and that age was tied to the alcohol level and highway funding by the federal government. So I think that's a wise decision, but you cannot open carry firearms, rifles. Now, some states like Michigan, you can, but that was just very alarming to me. Now, that raises another issue, and I have this happen repeatedly, where someone, the situation at Walmart, textbook, you had someone that with military training, as the sheriff pointed out, it was apparent he knew how to handle that situation. But you just cannot brandish a firearm. It's kind of like having a rattlesnake around your hip. You can carry it, but if you point, if you brandish, then you've committed an aggravated assault.
Threaten another driver.
It happens all too frequently. The other thing in rewinding back to Walmart, and I want to make sure we get this point, because I've had these cases and they're painful. Unless you are trained, unless you know what you're doing, be careful when you try to intercede. Because how many times have we seen someone try to apprehend somebody for shoplifting or break up a fight, and then they turn around and become the victim of a violent crime, as we saw here at Rural King not too long ago. Very, very unfortunate.
Isn't that why some stores have a policy where you're not allowed to confront whomever is
the
coming
employees,
in?
that's correct. You're not allowed to. Don't try to stop them from going out the door if they are. And because they don't want that happening. They don't want their employees to become the victim, as Greg said.
Well, go ahead.
Let me ask you this, because you've got a unique perspective, and I see kind of both sides. Walmart, you got a guy with a gun, open carry, hero, saved a lot of lives. You got people that get into road rage, brandish a gun, bad things happen. They threaten people. Is open carry and this isn't a Second Amendment issue. It's not whether guns, no guns, but is open carry a good thing from a law enforcement perspective for citizens?
And I didn't think so without proper training. Now it's just you can go buy a gun and carry. And I was one of those that fought for, even when we did the permit, fought to make sure that they had training to use the weapon, when not to pull it, and so I think it's a mistake without proper training. Everybody can carry the weapon. If they don't, if they're not felons, everybody can carry a weapon, but make sure that they know how to handle the weapon.
Well, going back to your point, someone breaks into your home, you've got a gun by your bed, and you don't really know how to use it, they're going to take that gun from you. I mean, you're putting yourself at such a risk.
Yeah, and you have to know how to use it.
Yeah.
You have to know how to shoot. You'd be surprised at how many times. I mean, I was a firearms instructor from 1979 on. You'd be surprised at how many policemen miss a target during qualification. And so, that's why we went when I was sheriff. I made everybody qualify twice a year for that reason, to stay on top of it. And like you said, someone that doesn't know how to handle it in their room at night, even if they pull the trigger, they may miss, and then they're in real trouble.
Yeah. And that happens more than we realize, doesn't it?
Yes.
All right.
Unfortunately, it does.
Let's talk about another case, and this one is a little bit closer to home. It's in Memphis, and we touched on this, but I want to get into more of this. It's a domestic situation, as it's been called. There were 3 people who came up to a woman's doorstep at her home. They started banging on the door. They said, "Hey, we're coming in. We're coming in." The woman said, "I've got my children." "No, you're not coming in." "Yes, we are. We don't care about the kids. We're coming in." They broke down the door. The woman shot one of them. It's non-life-threatening injuries, but she's not going to get in trouble either, is she?
No.
From all that we know about this case.
And that raises a good point. You are allowed in Tennessee to use deadly force if someone breaks in your home. It's called the Castle Doctrine. So you don't have to worry about the degree of force, whatever. You have the right to use deadly force to protect your home. Now, where that scenario raises an interesting issue, because I've tried cases on both ways. You got to make sure, and Sheriff's smiling because he's seen them. I had someone who was protecting themselves 3 feet from the front door out in the driveway. Person got charged. The person enters the doorway, there's no case. So remember, you have an absolute right to protect your home, but they have to be in the domicile, they have to be in the house. You can't use deadly force when someone is about to walk in the door, near the door, beating on the door. So it's...
How's that different from a parking lot where you feel threatened?
Well, you're out in the open. However, as he's talking about on the Castle Doctrine, which gives you those rights in the home, that doesn't work for you to step out the door and shoot somebody in the driveway because you think they may come in the home, or they're out there breaking in the car or still in the car. Doesn't apply to that. As Greg just said, it's for the home, in the home.
And let's talk about the types of people that get in trouble for this. Like this guy in Michigan, he was known by police. You've committed some crimes before you end up in that kind of perilous situation, usually, correct? You know these people.
Well, that's a good thing. And, when you debate on gun control, not gun control, there's a good example of a mass killing, stabbing, injury, and it wasn't a gun, it was a knife. But what we see often, time and time again, is drugs, alcohol, mental health. And
mental health was the case with this guy.
That's an epidemic. When you see school shooters, you see mental health issues. And what we've done, in Tennessee, here in Knox County, Sheriff, when you were behind the wheel, the sheriff's office, you had Lakeshore.
Yeah.
And
Old Eastern State. Yes.
Yeah, Eastern State. We have no mental health facilities here. No. We use the detention center. So, why do you see people running around like that with mental health issues? Because we don't have the ability or the funding to fix that problem.
Well, we also need more beds when it comes to the drug problem as well.
Yeah, absolutely. For both of those. Shutting down the psychiatric center in East Tennessee was a horrible mistake. There has to be a place to put these people rather than in the jail with the criminals, and that's the reason that originally that the state established these facilities across the state, and they're almost all closed.
And there was such an outcry, as we all remember at the time. People saw this happening. And here we are. And
unfortunately, then you see something play out like the Walmart situation with someone with mental health issues. And then you ask yourself, just like you ask, how did we get here? How does a person with mental health problems allowed to
When they knew about this guy, he'd been in trouble before.
Well, they were
where
looking
do you
for him
put
the
him?
night before.
Where did he go?
Yeah,
exactly.
In another county. And so he was fleeing. But, no mechanism to catch somebody that's mentally ill or dangerous. And I mean, you could just drive down the streets of Knox County, Kingston Pike, whatever, and I mean, you see people that you can tell are objectively schizophrenic, have tremendous mental health issues, and you know, it's a recipe for disaster.
How bad is the problem now compared to when you were in office?
Well, it seems that we always had this problem, but
Yeah.
it's more rampant everywhere, and a lot, as Greg had mentioned a few minutes ago, a lot of it has to do with drugs. You know, a lot of these people have been on drugs for so many years. You know, they have mental issues now, and you never know when that mental issue is going to take over, and then they just lose their mind and want to hurt everybody.
And that's a big concern for law enforcement.
Oh, it
You
is.
don't know what you're going to get.
No, you have no idea that they have that history when you first start to deal with them.
And training, I would think, for officers has escalated, one would hope, to deal with this kind of thing over the years as it has evolved.
Yeah, the State Post Commission, Peace Officer Standard and Training Commission, has made law enforcement agencies have more training in that area.
All right. We're going to take a break really quickly. We'll be back. We'll talk about more of these issues and weigh in. Let us know what you think. We'll be right back. All right, everybody, thanks again for being with us. And keep your questions coming. We just got one a couple of seconds ago, and it's a really good one we got on YouTube. And the person asks, what about age? If the person is a minor and someone comes through the door, threatens them, they feel their life is in danger, and they shoot, they're underage, where does the law stand on that?
I think they would have the right to use self-defense, but it raises kind of a panoply of issues, you know, where they have the right to possess a firearm if they're, you know, under the age that you can, and it would have to be a reasonable belief under the circumstances. So let's say they're 17. Did the 17-year-old have a reasonable belief to feel they were in imminent harm or of deadly force, serious bodily injury? So I think they would be allowed legally to use that degree of force. But the question is, what would the reasonable objective standard be under those circumstances for a 17-year-old?
Have you dealt with cases like that?
Well, no, not with lethal force with a juvenile, but yes, I've gone in when I was on patrol, and you know, there'd be just kids there, parents gone, and something had happened, and one of the kids had a gun, you know, and I just put it up, you know, and I'd vote yes on that, you know. If someone's breaking in the home, not out in the driveway, not on the front porch, but if they were breaking in the home, I would say he has that right. But, you know, again, you didn't ask Mr. Isaacs. He's the lawyer.
That's why we call it Ask Isaacs.
That's right.
Okay, to reiterate, if you're just joining us, you brought up, you know, your home, the Castle Doctrine, where you can't walk out on your porch and you see somebody walking up. You can't say, hey, boom, get out of here. There are parameters that you have to respect. But then in the case of the Michigan stabbing situation, this happened in a parking lot where the guy was apprehended really by this citizen. So let's talk about the difference in those laws once again.
But again, that was defense of a third party in
Correct.
Michigan, and he put himself in the shoes of others. Then they would have been entitled to use that level of force. But again, he didn't discharge his firearm. He clearly brandished it, as the sheriff pointed out, in a way that you could tell that he had been trained. He was very
He
deliberate,
knew what he was
very
doing.
assertive.
Yeah.
But just remember, you can only use that degree of force that's propelled to defend yourself, that's being used against you. And to use deadly force, you have to be in imminent fear of serious bodily injury or harm. And it is, Lori, an objective, reasonable standard. So, you know, I hope that the takeaway should not be that let's all be more proactive in using self-defense, but let's just be reasonable under the circumstances and hope that you can't do it. But, you know, there's a lot of fine lines. An absolute right under the Castle Doctrine to defend your home, you're king of the castle, as a lawyer in a law firm I used to say, and that's the only criminal defense law he knew, the Castle Doctrine. But even though you can open carry, and you see sometimes people as a hero, brandishing a gun can get you in trouble versus the people that you think are bad actors. So, self-defense is a very guarded right that we have that needs to be used wisely, needs to be used, only when needed. But don't, the takeaway shouldn't be, I'm here being a vigilante citizen. So
Be the citizen like that former Marine. I mean, thank goodness he was there. And when you think about the vulnerable people in wheelchairs, those who really had trouble getting around, that's who this guy apparently went after and injured. So this guy, this former Marine, really helped save the day. And that brings this question, and we always get these when we have stories like this. People ask, what do I need to do to protect myself in that situation? Whether it's, they're all different. The New York shooter, the people in the high rise, were they just sitting ducks? Did they have a chance?
let me show you what I did before I'd reach for a gun. I would reach for this and dial 911.
Absolutely.
And then you've got people like Sheriff Hutchison who are well-trained and whatever, and let the professionals do it. Force, all that needs to be used as a
Very
last
measured.
resort,
Yeah.
in a very measured way. But pick up the phone. There were so many times if people would have just picked up the phone, things would have been handled much differently.
Especially the guy seen with the rifle, just calmly walking down
There
Park
should have been
Avenue.
a lot of 911 calls on that. And you mentioned on carrying the open carry. I was against open carry. The reason being is you're walking around, let's say you're walking around in a department store or something, you've got open carry, people want to cause trouble, can start picking on you. What are you going to do? Pull your gun? No, you may end up in a fight because you do have a gun. But you can't use the gun because somebody didn't like the fact that you had one.
And let's go back to the parking lot at the Walmart. That is such a good teaching point because, you can stop somebody that's committing a mass act of violence with deadly force, but if someone was out there getting robbed or their purse snatched, I don't know that you would have the authority to use deadly force to stop a crime. So just remember, there are 27 shades of gray. So just because you've got a gun, you can only use that deadly force to propel imminent deadly force being used against
You
you.
see a purse
Against
being
you,
snatched,
purse.
you call 911 again.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
It's a no-fail way to do it.
Yeah. And a lot of people do that. A lot of people will dial 911, and a lot of times they follow that person and until law enforcement gets there and they go, that's him right there. And I've had that as well. Just they hang around and follow them at a safe distance and then point out to where they are.
Oh my goodness. I don't know. Is that safe? You said safe distance.
I wouldn't recommend it, no.
Here's another question from YouTube. How many feet bubble, a foot bubble, is considered personal space?
Well, I think actions go along with it as
Yeah.
well. What are the actions prior to them getting close to you? I'm not going to let them get too close. You don't know what their training is. You don't know what they can do physically. I was going through the FBI Academy. We had an instructor up there, Chin Ho Lee was his name, and he was about, probably 5'1". I wouldn't let that guy get 20 feet from me until I shot him. He was that good.
Wow.
So it just depends. Whenever you feel threatened and that you're going to have bodily harm against you, that's when you take action. But you're going to have to convey that to the law enforcement and to the system. I felt that he was going to kill me, and that's the key.
You have to make that very, very clear.
Absolutely.
You talked earlier about the importance, if you're going to carry, you got to know how to use that gun. What kind of training is out there for people if they don't know? I mean, I would think if they purchase a gun, they're going to get that information at that point. But what do they need to do?
Well, the handgun permit system has instructors everywhere, and there are several here in this county. I'm one as well, but I don't do that anymore. But you find out, you get online, look at the Tennessee handgun permit, and then you find an instructor in your area. Even if you don't want the handgun permit because there's open carry, go take the training.
How long is the training typically?
No, a day. It's done in one day.
And you feel pretty confident that somebody would be able to use that after a day's training?
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
Interesting. Anything you'd like to add? We're almost out of time. I'll let you have the last word, Greg Isaacs.
You start with some basic premises, and
Yeah.
the Second Amendment's an absolute right. You have the right to defend your home, and you have the right to defend yourself. And under Tennessee law, you don't have a requirement to retreat. But just remember, when you use force to protect yourself or protect others, it's limited to the degree of force or danger that's being used against you or that third party. It's got to be a reasonable belief, and hopefully you won't have to do that. So, always reach for your phone before you reach for your gun. But I think the thing I could tell people the most is two things: secure your firearm, because there's children and there's
Absolutely.
people, whatever. The second thing is, as Sheriff Hutchison said, get the training, because they will teach you how to deal with fight or flight. And I think one of the things, and you tell me, that you're taught is if you are going to pull a gun, there's an intruder in your house, you better be able to use it.
Absolutely. Not only pull it, but you better be accurate enough to hit that person. You miss the person, then they're going to charge you. Then they're going to have the gun.
Yeah, scary situation. Hope, how much time do we have? All right, I'm asking our digital producer here. Before we let you go, I know I said you'd have the last word, but we do have one more minute.
I didn't believe you.
You were the face of Knox County law enforcement for many years. We did so many stories together, covered Hurricane Katrina. I will never forget that, where you all took water to the victims and really helped people out. Tell everybody what you're doing these days.
Well, right now, what I have been doing since then is working for some law firms and representing policemen and law enforcement agencies that have been sued. And for the most part, I have a PI license to do that, of course, but and that's kind of what I've been doing.
All right. Well, we thank you for your years of service and continuing to do that, and for joining us today. It's good to see you.
Good to see you,
Good to
Sheriff.
see you all.
All right. Thanks so much for joining us, everyone. And we'll see you right back here. We'll talk more about this
At 5:30.
coming up at 5:30.